Good afternoon, and welcome to the American Floral Endowment's Grow Pro webinar series. I am your moderator, Karen Schneck. I am a member of AFE's Young Professional Council and a senior research specialist in live goods R&D at Scott's Miracle-Gro. I coordinate the annual flower trials for the Scott's Miracle-Gro and Bonnie Plants flower programs. Today's session is on managing peat shortages. On behalf of the endowment, I am excited to be a part of AFE's Grow Pro webinar series that features a new topic every month presented by an industry expert. The webinars are free to everyone thanks to the generous support of AFE's sponsors. The views and opinions expressed in these webinars are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of AFE. As an independent nonprofit, AFE cannot endorse any specific product or opinion. Today's session is sponsored by AFE's Young Professional Council. Established in 2015, the YPC offers leadership, professional development, and networking opportunities for young industry professionals. These networking opportunities involve meeting peers as well as industry leaders. If you're interested in joining the YPC or learning more, please visit endowment.org/YPC. If you're interested in becoming a sponsor for one of our Grow Pro webinars, you can find that information on AFE's website at endowment.org/GrowPro. Today's session was pre-recorded in English by Dr. Brian Schulker. After the presentation, Dr. Schulker will join us for a Q&A. Feel free to submit your questions through the Q&A feature or chat at any time. We'll answer as many as we can before the end of the hour. Unanswered questions may be answered through a separate email exchange. This session is being recorded and will be shared to AFE's YouTube account. Through YouTube's accessibility features, you can access closed caption in other languages. To get us started, I'd like to share a bit about today's expert speaker. Dr. Brian Schulker is the Business Development Manager of Growing Media Constituents at Jiffy, where he leads the innovation of their global portfolio of products using alternative fibers and technologies in alignment with their sustainability goals. With an extensive background in fiber-based growing media, Schulker's research encompasses various aspects of substrate production and use. He is also a member of AFE's Young Professional Council. Dr. Schulker, welcome and thank you for presenting today on managing peat shortages.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining. My name is Dr. Brian Schulker, and I am the Business Development Manager at Jiffy Group. And today, for all of you who are here, we're going to be talking about how to manage peat shortages that we've been seeing for quite some time now. So before we get moving, I want to give you a little overview on who we are at Jiffy. This is not an infomercial. Peat in the news, what we're seeing right now, what's going on around the world. Why peat's an important resource. I think anyone who's watching this presentation does understand the brevity of the situation that we're in and why peat is necessary for our global food supply. And then we'll jump into some of the alternatives. I know we've all heard of coconut coir, wood fiber, grasses, compost, and then others. And then I have a couple surprises along the way. So who are we at Jiffy? I'm only using this slide because I want to give a little bit of a brand recognition and talk about who my company is that I work for. We are a global manufacturer of growing media with an emphasis on solution-led products. As we continue to move through the next generation of growing media, we all have to be a solution-led company. We target market segments with a diverse portfolio of growing solutions. We combine our worldwide presence as we are based in Zwijndrecht, Netherlands, with production sites all around the world, with an emphasis on local knowledge, because not everyone grows the same way. People in the Middle East versus people in the West Coast of the United States versus Canada versus South America, we're all growing our plants a little bit differently, and that local knowledge is what makes the difference. Our first product, as a little fun fact, was the Jiffy pot in the early 1950s. That was our first big innovation, and here we are today still selling that same innovation. And it's a little bit different now, as an eco-friendly pot is definitely more on the today list than it was back then. Some of our growing solutions, just to highlight them a little bit to understand what we're doing. The Jiffy pot is what I told you about there. That is our biodegradable container. It's also porous, so wonderful in multiple different situations. Our Jiffy grow bags, we can use those, and they're coconut coir based. We also have the Jiffy grow blocks, Jiffy pellets, which is a compressed disc that expands at a 7-to-1 ratio, and it's good for many different products. The Performa product is our glue plug that we have there. That's a ready-to-use product. And then we have our Jiffy substrates. And I think that's going to be where we kind of talk a little bit more about today is the substrate side of things. So what is the press saying about peat? Now, this is a little bit, whether it's 2021, 2019, or 2024, I promise you the same topics are being talked about today. Starting off with peat-free alternatives for growers. No matter where you are, you've heard the topic about peat-free alternatives. Every company globally is looking to advance their range of sets to the benchmark, looking forward to the next generation of growing media. If we want to be able to hit our population that's continuing to grow and continue to grow food products for the world, we have to look towards the future. Every startup, every customer is talking about coconut husks, what we're doing with that waste, what we're doing with the next generation of products, where it's coming from, new renewable tree-based raw materials. We're talking about wood fiber, we're talking about pine bark. And then I'm sure you've seen in the popular press articles that there's always, possibly every month, a new conversation about where research is going in the future. What is the current state of the industry? There's a huge topic that we're talking about right now. What is next for us? Everybody wants to know that. And the answer is that's different for everybody. What drove this movement? So a little bit about it. Pandemic influenced green industry growth. I know we don't want to talk about the pandemic. I don't want to talk about the pandemic. We're trying to keep that in the past. However, 1 in 3 people picked up gardening in 2020. So if we're going to talk about a benefit of the pandemic, it's the fact that we got younger customers into our industry. Millennials and Gen X seem to love the idea of home gardening. These indoor container gardens actually had some pretty huge mental health benefits. I mean, everybody wants to have some plant in their house to make their house look a little bit better. You go to an office that doesn't have any plants, you know the morale's a little bit lower. So the idea of everyone bringing in this indoor garden actually helped everyone mentally. To put that in fiscal sense, Americans spent $8.5 billion more on gardening related items in 2020 than they did in 2019. While yes, we had a lot more time at home, it just shows you that when we are sitting in a dark space that doesn't have any plants, this is a big deal. Now, obviously, the next topic is that in the last few years, the industry definitely did see a decline in sales. There's a little bit of paranoia involved with that when everyone started to overstock and started to overorder. A lot of people had a lot of extra stock on hand that was kind of bleeding into the next few years. And because of that, we're seeing an uptick again in sales for 2024 as people's stocks slowly dwindle. Now, how did this impact growing media? So this historic consumer purchasing funnels downstream to growers and then growing media demand. Obviously, as they're exploding in sales at Lowe's, Home Depot, Walmart, wherever you buy your plants, it goes all the way back down to the growing media suppliers who are trying to supply the nurseries and greenhouses to grow the plants that are being sold then on at the garden centers. Climate-induced low harvesting of Canadian peat was also a big deal. We've had some pretty crazy amounts of rain happening in the Northern Hemisphere, and because of that, the peat hasn't been able to be harvested. If you don't know much about peat harvesting, just imagine a large land area of just peat being harvested by a giant vacuum cleaner. The more water in the peat or on the ground, the harder it is to suck up that vacuum, which means the less we can actually harvest the peat. We also have new crops moving into container production, and I'll touch on that in a moment. And then this continued push for renewable alternatives for the future. We need these alternatives to make sure that we can hit our goals to keep food on the table and plants in our houses. And then controlled environment agriculture, that's going to be a topic that we never stop talking about because it's just continually evolving. And we are trying to keep up with the innovations that are continuing to move forward. So new crops and containers. I love using this photo because I think it's an homage to the idea that any plant can grow anywhere at any time. This was actually a horticultural theme park in France we went to after an IHC conference down there a couple of years ago. That's Dr. Jeb Fields showing off, wishing that entire thing was made of pine bark, but we're going to talk about that later. So strawberries are obviously a hot topic going into multiple different systems for use. Obviously, they were traditionally grown outdoors, moving them indoors, and now moving them into vertical farms. So they continue to innovate how they're growing these plants. Blueberries as well used to be a massive outdoor crop, still is a massive outdoor crop. However, they're also going into containers, and multiple companies are putting together these products that facilitate blueberry growth in containers. Raspberries, same thing, moving in the same direction, whether it's propagation, whether it's transplants, or whether it's full-on fruiting crops in the container that you see there in the picture in the middle and on the left. And lastly, cannabis. I don't always love talking about it, but we have to. This product is going to continue to explode, and there's a myriad of different options for what you can grow this product in, whether it's in a container, in a controlled environment, or so on. If you haven't seen this paper or in any other presentation since 2017, then I am impressed. This has definitely been brought out a lot of times, and I'm only bringing it out again because I do want to emphasize why this is a part of our future. This was a wonderful forecast done by Chris Block back in 2017, discussing the current demand at that time to the projected demand of 2050. I want to bring your attention down to the bottom two figures here. These are in million cubic meters per year. In 2017, it was estimated that we only needed about 67 million cubic meters. Still a large number, but compare that to the projected volume of 2050 at 283 million cubic meters. Now, yes, you see an increase on the right-hand side in peat and core at 200 and 418%. But focus on wood, fiber, and bark at 1,000% and 500%. These are two different reasons for this possible explosion. One, the continued evolution of how we produce our wood fiber and the explosion of new products on the market. We're getting there, we're moving forward. And back in 2017, wood fiber wasn't the largest product in the market, and it's continuously being more and more accepted. Bark is a massive product in the nursery industry, and it's going to continue to be in the future. So why peat? What is so important about peat? That's a very loaded question, and I can't answer that in a 40-minute presentation. But it's the most prevalent horticultural substrate. This has been used for decades. This is a huge product with extremely beneficial properties. These characteristics have been known by growers for a very long time. We know how to use it. We know we know where it's coming from. We know the benefits of European versus Canadian. It's a fantastic product in containers, and we're going to continue to use it for a very long time. Sustainability measures are constantly being implemented for future success, and a lot of research is being done at a lot of universities, especially in Canada, on turning this back into a carbon sink. I know that it's been a problem or a topic that's been publicized in the media. New York Times has put stuff out on this, that peat bobs, because they're such a carbon sink, as you're agitating and harvesting, you're releasing CO2 in the atmosphere. Yes, that is true. However, there's a lot of data being driven by organizations like the Canadian Sphagnum Peat Moss Association, which I'll touch on in a moment, that show that we're overblowing some of this out of proportion. So in Canada, and this is all sourced by the Canadian Sphagnum Peat Moss Association, they deserve the credit for these data points. Peatlands cover 113.6 million hectares of space, of which 0.03% of the resource has actually been harvested. And I know I touched on earlier in the presentation, if you haven't seen how peat is harvested, it looks like a giant vacuum cleaner. The pictures there on the right are images of that giant vacuum cleaner. You have the peat bog, and then you have it being sucked out of the ground. However, you can tell from that photo if you had a high rainfall event or a very wet season, how that would definitely impact how much peat is being harvested per day. The harvest season isn't very long, and those months are very important for an adequate supply. 70% of the Canadian production locations take place in the eastern side of Canada, so Quebec, New Brunswick. And 80% of those are certified Floral. That's responsibly produced peat. US imports 90% of our peat produced in Canada. Well, 90% of the peat produced in Canada, which actually is a 98% of the imported peat into the country, with an annual production of about 11.8 million cubic meters in Canada alone. So this is just to show you the massive amount of peat that we are actually using and how we're really not even touching the massive reserves that are actually up there in Canada. However, harvesting and climatic events, all of those are what are bringing in these low harvest yields. I think it was 2023, the harvest of 100%, what we were hoping for, we got about 45 to 48% harvest. And so you're seeing why we're having these conversations about how to extend the amount of peat that we actually have. So talking about some of the organizations and some of the big ones that we discuss often, the CSPMA, the Canadian Stagnant Peat Moss Association, they are a fantastic organization located up in the Ottawa region, working on the lobbying side of things, tons of research happening up there. And they're doing some really good work for the marketing of peat. The Quebec Peat Moss Producers Association, the New Brunswick Peat Producers Association, and others. And then we also have on the European side, Growing Media Europe. This is also a big conglomerate of multiple industry leaders that are all coming together, and academics, to kind of for the betterment in the future of our industry. And I have on there on the right side that the Growing Media Europe and CSPMA signed a memorandum to kind of come together and promote both of their topics at hand and use their resources kind of in more of a linear fashion and not separately. And then Veriflora, this is a big deal, the responsibly managed peatlands. I know a lot of companies that are certified by this, and this just shows you what we're doing and why we're doing it, and finding more ways to prove how we're harvesting our product and how we're not actually fully degrading the land like a lot of media sources would have you believe. So alternatives. So we talked about peat, we talked about how important this is, we talked about why we need it. Let's discuss why alternatives also represent the future. So peat is an irreplaceable resource. You know that I talked about this. I'm not surprising you with that fact. Abundant resources are still there. It also has a very low cost. It's also regionally specific for a lot of growers in the Northern Hemisphere. Some of the issues that are plaguing peat, we're talking about climatic events that are reducing harvests. We're talking about these impending legislations on the European side. And then there's globally different management practices in North America versus Europe. The Europeans used to use peat to heat their houses. We're not talking about the same thing that we're dealing with here in North America. Obviously, peat is harvested a little bit differently. There's block cut peat. And then there's the vacuum machines that you saw over on the Canadian side. That also comes back to public perception. This is articles that you're reading in the media. This is ways that negatively are affecting how the public sees peat, what peat is, and if all they know is that peat is a carbon sink and we're harvesting that peat, then peat is no different than oil or gas. It's very different here, and I think that's going to be a big deal. That's why the CSPMA is doing a lot of work on the marketing side of things to really make sure everyone is educated on what we're doing with peat and how it's harvested. That's why I say here that researchers are globally actively trying to find that next best material. Peat can be used at 100% by itself and a plant will grow just fine. We've known that, we've used it forever. These alternatives that we're talking about are just trying to extend the peat. And what I mean by that is by taking 100% peat, removing 20% and adding something else, adding an amendment that we can keep going, using less peat, also possibly saving the grower on their bottom line cost. And that's why there's a lot of market options that are about the reduction of peat and peat reduced media. So in this movement towards peat free, yeah, there's plenty of success stories. That's an image there on the left of 100% wood fiber growing a successful crop. However, that's not the same story for everybody. And that is not the same story for every grower who doesn't know how to use these alternative materials. Some of the peat extenders and alternatives are shown here. We have wood fiber, coconut coir, pine bark, perlite, biochar, and others. And I will go deeper into all of these here shortly, but I wanted you to see the differences. Perlite's been used for a very long time as a peat perlite blend. You've probably heard that all the time. You've probably bought a product from a garden center that has perlite in it. Bark is used mainly always, or not always, often in nursery substrates. Coconut coir has been a massive product. It's been fantastic for a lot of growers. It is definitely the next in line. If you don't want a peat product, you're getting a coconut coir product. Wood fiber has been constantly researched for the past few decades now, and is now continually every year getting more and more interested by growers to use wood fiber in their products. And biochar is just fantastic on the market. It's moving forward, and the technology is getting there to lower the cost for customers to want to use it. So what I want to call these are the big three. I know it's not a coined term. Do not fight me on this. The big three products are starting with coconut coir. This is a byproduct of the coconut industry. This was someone long ago that saw waste product and turned it into a profitable product. These husks are processed through a shredder, giving the multiple particles, shapes, and sizes that we see here in growing media. This is categorized as fiber, chips, and core pith. And a lot of companies who are selling coconut coir on the market have all three of these products. This is after the fruit of the coconut is harvested. The shell is what's left. The fibers can be both used in growing media or spun into textiles, and then the rest of the product is then sent through a shredder and turns into the product that you see there on the bottom right, a very wonderful growing media. Not without its issues. Coconut palms are a tropical plant, coastal tropical plant. We're talking about a lot of salt possibly in there, and so there's a little washing and a couple other processes that are necessary to make sure this product is good for growing. So a little data to show. This is the global coconut production back in 2019. This is the different companies that are showing you. But I want to look, Sri Lanka and India are two of the big countries that we look at for our growing media. Talk about the actual land area to yield. Sri Lanka is doing the most here at 0.5 mega hectares to a yield of 4.9. Like this is for a small land area to large amount of stuff. I mean, Brazil at 0.19. So you're seeing that you can get a lot from a little space. And that's kind of why coconut plantations are coming on to be bigger in this industry. Export volumes. Yes, there's plenty of other options. I told you that the textile industry does like to use or does use coconut pretty often. But just looking specifically in 2020 and 2021 at export of pith and fibers, you're looking at a massive amount of product compared to the rest. This is just to show you that every year it's exponentially increasing, and especially in growing media, this is only going to continue to increase. Wood fiber is another one of the big three. The use of wood fiber and other wood components in growing media is dating back to the 80s and 90s. Back in Europe, it was first, and then came over to the US in 2004 to gain more interest. Every picture you see kind of lining this slide is just showing you the different types and shapes of wood fiber that you may see in a product on the market. So many research trials have been done to show viability of wood fiber substrates. There's a few labs in the US that do this specifically, a couple labs in Europe that are doing this as well, all of which to show the viability of wood fiber to create a very sustainable product. I'm sure you've heard, and if you haven't, here's the first time, that local for local is a big deal. A lot of companies are trying to make their products closer to where the end product, the plants or the fruit, are actually being produced. And so wood fiber has been a big deal because trees grow just about everywhere. We have plenty of forested land, especially here in the Southeast where I'm based, in the US. And so there's research trials on different species, different types of trees, hardwood, softwood, and so on to kind of get that right pinpoint. There's never going to be the perfect wood fiber. There is fantastic wood fiber, and everyone's going to have a little bit of a different type. Sawdust, screw extruded, hammer milled, and disc refined are all similar processes. I'll discuss that in a moment. With new challenges but cost savings presenting themselves to growers. We're talking about finding ways to not only have a sustainable new product, but also to help save the grower money in the long run. What is the biggest advantage of a fiber-based product? Is the fact that you're manufacturing it. If you compare this to peat, peat has beneficial properties because of Mother Nature doing her thing. You have fantastic porosity, airspace, water holding abilities, wettability. A lot of these properties that growers like and that companies also like to put together in our products. And the benefit of wood fiber is that we're all trying to mimic that with how we develop these fiber-based products. And so there are three very main ways to do wood fiber processing. We have screw extrusion, disc refining, and hammer milling, all of which produce a very different looking product. The hammer mill product is a much more, it's hammers going through, crushing the wood shards and pushing them through a screen. A disc refiner is what you'd expect. It looks like it's spinning cotton, and a lot of products on the market that are disc refined are very fine. A little bit harder to blend, but very good products in their own right. And then screw extrusion is almost a hybrid of both in the way that you have a final product, very fluffy, still has those fibers, those small spun fibers that you're looking for, but also sort of has more of the shards that you see in a hammer mill product, all of which have benefits, all of which have pitfalls. It's up to you on what you're looking for and what you need and what you like in your own to find your right solution. And I want to go back to this slide just to highlight again, in case you forgot, wood fiber is projected to need a 1000% increase by 2050. This is the largest on the board, and this is why a lot of the almost, don't quote me on this, the most research is going into this to get more wood fiber products on the market today. Pine bark is the last of the big three. This one's been used for quite some time. Bark has been widely used for decades, as I said, known for its high porosity, long-term stability. This is the bark of the outside of the exterior of a tree. This is common, very much common in nursery crops. You can do a lot with the particle size with pine bark. I've seen some companies that are selling pine bark with a specific container capacity of X amount. So they're even making it so that when you buy the product, you know exactly what you're getting and what you should expect. And it's best for the consumer, so you know how to irrigate and how to manage that product. Some of the common tree species that are used, they very much vary by region because pine bark is a regionally sourced product. So if you're out in the West, you have firs, redwoods, yellow pine, ponderosa pine. Out West, out in the North, you have red, white, and gray pine. And then southern yellow, loblolly, slash, and shortleaf, and others. These are just some, not all, of the trees that are used to develop pine bark substrates. Typically, aged soft bark is used. Pine bark is a little bit different because when you're producing the pine bark, there's fresh and there's aged. Aged pine bark is almost like a very light composted type product. They'll manufacture the product, leave it in very tall piles, constantly turning it as it's being heated. And there's different studies along the way that show you how each timeline benefits the final product when you grow a plant in it. And so a lot of research has been done on this. Pine bark has been used for a very long time. Reach out to your local universities. I'm sure there's somebody that's doing this type of product research. I use this picture to show you the differences. So obviously pine bark is being manufactured and shown in that picture on the left. You have these large bark chips. This is before they go into the next processing of being actually milled into a finer particle size. And then you even have pictures like that one on the right, where bark can be used just as a container cover to reduce the amount of moisture that's being lost on the surface of the container. It could be a 100% substrate. It could be a blended substrate, but you will find bark almost every time you go to a garden center and see kind of more of a large tree crop that's grown in a nursery. There are other alternatives. I'm only talking, the big three were the big three that I could guarantee you're probably going to see somewhere if you went out today. Other products in the market that are coming that are also ways to extend our peat are products like biochar. If you tune into the next AFE RoPro series in April, Dr. Ping Yu, who did a lot of her research on biochar, will be doing that. And I very much highly recommend you join into her presentation. But we're talking about a product that's been created through pyrolysis, which is a heat-driven reaction. Multiple types of biomass that can be used to develop this product. A very stable product, high in carbon, increased stability, and good porosity benefits. Again, this is still being manufactured for the particle sizes. Not as highly used, a little bit expensive, but a very good product. There are grasses that are being used as well. We have processed miscanthus here on the left, a research study that's being done, or that has been done in Europe, and an entire dissertation done specifically on miscanthus. Then we also have a lot of research being done on sugarcane bagasse. This is the excess from the sugarcane industry. This is after the sugars have been taken out of in a process, then we have what's left of the canes. Not the most stable product in the world, but very good product in its own right, and you can see a picture of it on there on the right. Both of which are manufactured, both of which particle sizes can be manipulated, and both of which are being actively researched to be used in growing media. Compost, everyone's heard about compost one time or another. You might have tried to do it in your backyard. You might even be doing it on your balcony if you live in an apartment building. I'm sure your neighbors don't love that. This is really just product that's all being put together in wood rows, like you see there on the right, aged over time, and let the microbes go to work. And then you have a product later on. This can be used as a beneficial nutrient. This can be used as a 100% growing media. It does not have a very high stability. Obviously, the microbes are continually activating and degrading, but a very good future product as we're trying to get waste products to go into growing media. Then you also have gel-based products. These are just some products that I've seen on the market. One recently last week at the Indoor AgCon that I was able to attend. These are these gel-based plugs that a lot of companies are looking into using them to have in their early young plant propagation. These are just 3 companies that I brought up. There are more companies. Please don't take any of the companies that I put in this presentation as the only ones that are on the market. I promise you there's more, and if there aren't more today, there will be more tomorrow. More companies are continuously coming out with these types of products. These are really interesting. These are usually about 90 to 95% water. As the plant grows, the gel slowly degrades away, all of which are being produced, most of which are being produced environmentally sustainable. And we're talking about 0 waste into the water supply. So either get the product or what's looked at on the Veritas product on the right. You could even make the product yourself at your own location. So again, local for local type of philosophy where you're not shipping the product, you're just making it yourself. A very good alternative to other products. Then you have other things like pit moss is a wonderful product, and we have rice hulls as well. These are both other types of products. So we had wood-based products, we had coconut-based products, we had gel-based products, and then we have pit moss, which is a recycled newspaper type product. And then rice hulls are what we use. You probably have seen them multiple times. Say the garden center covering a potted plant to reduce moisture, or they can also be added to growing media. All of these are ways to help increase the amount of plants you can grow in a container with a reduced amount of peat that we're able to actually acquire. So I added some questions here because I know that everybody has a question. And it's not just one, there's many, and I'm sure there's going to be more. How do I extend the peat resources that are available? And that goes back to all of the options that I just showed you in the past slides. There are so many products in the market to help you reduce the amount of peat that's being used in your containers. 20, 30, 40, 50% could be an alternative material in conjunction with peat. Or in case of core, it could be 80%, 90%, 100% coconut core that is being used completely instead of peat. The answer to that question really just depends on where you are and what you want to use. What are you comfortable using? Work with whoever you get your product from and talk to them about what other options they have on the market. Can we see improved peat harvest in the future, or can we predict when they're going to be reduced? The answer is no. Unless you can tell me what the weather is going to be in 5 months' time, then we'll talk about that after the presentation. But these peat harvests are going to be variable every year. So being able ahead of the game with a peat reduced product or a peat free product is really how you can kind of get away from the idea that you have to be concerned every year about what that peat harvest is going to be. Or work with companies that have bogs in more than one location. I can say for my company that we have bogs not only in Eastern Canada, but we also have them in Sweden and Estonia. So we have more variability to deal with the climatic events. And not all companies have that, but some do. So and some companies are also in Canada and have multiple in Canada. So we have Western and Eastern Canada. It's not just, can I expect the weather to be different this year? It's how are companies actually preparing themselves for potential bad harvests. And what can I do to help facilitate the transition? This is where you really want to talk to whoever you get your product supplied from. This type of a conversation is, do I need a 30% perlite in my mix? Do I need a 30% wood fiber in my mix? Test them out. Most companies will allow you to trial a product, a new product or an old product, in say one of your benches of propagation or or young or mature plant production, and see how it works for you. Test multiple types. Don't just test one. See what you like the most. Don't be afraid to ask these questions. What I can say is I don't recommend going 100% and completely changing your whole production system and hoping and betting that you're ready for it. Take it slow. Does not have to be done this year. It can be done next year, but you want to keep it in your brain and think about what you need to do next. And do I think this is ever going to change? No, I really don't think that we're going to have our 100% peat supplies that we've always had in the past, but I do think we're going to continue to innovate with new, interesting products on the market, so that we'll reduce the stress on our peat supply every year. Wood fiber is coming huge, and that has definitely been a big thing in the market in the past 10 years for ways to reduce the amount of peat you're using in your mixes, and some of the other options like coconut coir, pine bark, miscanthus, big ass, and gels. These are all ways that you're going to be able to reduce the burden on yourself and make sure that you keep those healthy looking crops for the future. Again, every grower requires something a little bit different. Make sure you're flexible, willing to change some of these growing practices, be forward thinking, understand that we're not going to be able to do the same thing we've been doing for the past 50 years. Know that we have to be ready to make a little bit of a change. A little bit of a change is going to go a long way in the way that our crops are grown in the future. When we talk about peat reduced growing media, like I said, it can be whatever you want it to be. It's just using less than 100% peat. I know that term's been thrown around like crazy. It's wonderful in marketing. Peat reduced could be 10% perlite and 90% peat. Technically, you reduced 10% of your peat. However, a lot of research is being done to go up to 50, 60, and 70% of an alternative material and using that excess to be peat. So instead of peat being the main piece, it might actually just be the amendment in the future. We don't know. And these are some of the pictures that you see here on the right. That's a PTS 40. That's just a 40% wood fiber and 80 and 60% peat. And then on the right, you see the same thing with perlite and other as the picture kind of goes down. This completely depends on what you're looking for. And then peat-free growing media. This could be 100% coconut coir or 100% wood fiber, or 80% wood coconut coir, 20% wood fiber. This could be whatever you want it to be without peat involved. A lot of companies are having peat-free solutions on the market. And again, like I said earlier, reach out to whoever you do actually get your product from, understand what their portfolio looks like, and plan for the future. There's also other research being done on substrate stratification. It's a tongue twister. A lot of research being done down at LSU with Jeff Fields, and then at the USDA with James Owen and James Altland. This is where you're taking a container, sectioning it off with a finer material like a peat and a coarser material like a pine bark. There's a lot of it's continuously being researched. And this is kind of what it looks like. I did similar tests back in my grad school days where we did 75% wood fiber, and then 25% was a professional mix, or 50% wood fiber in a professional mix. There are some growers that are going to this type of a thing. Research is constantly being looked at to do this. This is still very new. It was been done in the past and being redone now in the future. And you can definitely look for this on the radar. This is the most literal way of peat reduced growing media. Half of it is not peat anymore. But let's talk about the long game. Europe versus North America. A lot of legislation's being passed in Europe to try to limit the amount of peat being used, whether it's a percentage or a total ban on peat. In North America, I would say we have a lot less of that coming or on the current docket in the future. There's technically no laws that have been passed so far. The CSPMA is doing an excellent job at marketing peat. making sure that the public knows about peat. The market drives North America, while legislation is driving the differences that are happening in Europe. So wherever you are, you're going to see something a little bit different. A lot of growing media companies, however, are global companies. And so the North American market might actually see more peat reduced or peat free products coming in the future because we can't create these products that are very market specific, especially when they're all coming from one certain location. These alternative amendments can help us extend the amount of peat that is needed in production. And there's 3 specific ways that this is going to get and continue to move forward. Research, whether it's from a company or from a university or a research institution, all of which are going to help us push to the next boundary. PhD students and master students continue to surprise us with their fantastic research that's coming out. And I know that we're going to get there. I'm not concerned about the future. Just no one knows what that next best product is going to be, and we're all looking for it. Restoration, I talked about this earlier. A lot of organizations like the CSPMA or Growing Media Europe are pushing to understand how long does it take to take a fully harvested peat bog and turn it back into a carbon sink. I know there's grad students doing this actually at the University of Laval up in Canada, really showing that a certain timeline is all you need to understand to kind of change that public perception. And then outreach, talk to who you get your supplies from, understand what their portfolio looks like, and make sure that you see what your options are. You may have been asking for that exact same mix for the past 10 years, but I promise you, every company has a product in the market right now that can hit a peat reduced product. And like I said, create a relationship with your supplier. I know that everybody has a sales rep in their region. I know that you have a company that's your favorite. I know that I seem biased because I obviously work for Jiffy, but I don't discount every company that you're working with. Everyone's trying to do the exact same thing. Make sure you know what they have and make sure you can build that relationship. Test new product. Everybody has something different. Everybody has something new. I think it's always best for you to know what you can and can't do, what you do and don't like. Understand your management practices, change your irrigation, change your fertigation, and we'll be ready for the next generation. And lastly, the American Floral Endowment, coming soon, is launching this new website called Sustainabloom, which is a resource hub for sustainable efforts. So this is not just a company. They're trying to put everything into one box for you as a resource, as a grower, as a researcher, to find the information that you're looking for. And with that, thank you so much for attending. I love using this photo in any of my presentations. It's actually at App State University in North Carolina. I guess it's a motivation for students that great derangement, catastrophes, and small screw-ups are going to happen. You're going to get there. We're all going to get there. My email is attached down there at the bottom. And same with my LinkedIn. Please reach out if you have any questions. And last but not least, I want to acknowledge, obviously, the company that I work for, Jiffy Growing Solutions. And this presentation was sponsored by the American Floral Endowment Young Professionals Council. To anyone who is a student or a young professional, highly recommend looking into this organization. They do meet and greets. You can kind of get a better understanding of what the industry looks like, especially as a student looking to kind of get into the industry when you graduate. And then next up, we have the next GrowPro webinar series is Tuesday, April 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern. This is with Dr. Ping Yu from the University of Georgia, a wonderful researcher talking about biochar for container production. Register at endowment.org//GrowPro. If you like this one, you'll like that one, and please continue to come and support the American Floral Endowment.
All right, thank you, Brian, for your presentation. We'll open it up now for some Q&A, and I did see some questions come through. So, hi, Brian. Okay, let's see. We've got our first question. Have you looked into shredded pine straw as a substrate?
I have not. Living in the South, obviously, I think one of the biggest ways you can see shredded pine straw is covering everyone's front lawn as a mulch replacement. But pine straw also kind of is a magnet for some pests. And so I don't know that
Mm,
I haven't personally looked into it, but I think the pine bark is what we're kind of sticking with on the pine tree specifically, you know?
mhm. Oh, that makes sense. Let's see. Our next question. Is there an equation on what to add to these substrates to bring the pH/nutrients back to that of the original peat? For example, add nitrogen to wood fiber products.
So from what I'm guessing from this question is that you're talking about using the alternative materials and using different pieces of an equation to bring that new material to what we expect from peat. And I guess my answer to that is almost everything is different. There is an equation, obviously, for liming rates or bringing your pH and EC to where you need to for whatever crop you're looking into. In terms of physical and chemical properties, those are all going to be based on manufacturing um, and really kind of the management strategies that you're looking to do. I think, yes, we can mimic what we're looking for on the porosity and physical property side of peat, but when it comes to chemically, that goes back to how you manage that crop itself.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Let's see. Has Jiffy looked into the corn product called Cormor? It seems to have faded away, but it was a great idea for mushroom growing.
Not that I know of, we have not. I've been with Jiffy for about a year now. And so that's possible that looked into it before I got here. But under my tenure with the company, we have not looked into it. But we do sell products in the mushroom industry, so I'll look into that for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'll need to look
Hey,
that up.
I'm always open to new ideas.
Yeah. Let's see. This person says, as a grower in Minnesota, they have somewhat local bogs to harvest from. Are there any other areas of the United States that have peat bogs?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the peat bogs that we see are definitely northern U.S. type peat bogs. There's also types of peat that can be harvested from Florida called Florida sedge peat, a very different type of product. But I
Hmm,
think the main bogs that we're talking about that are used in North America, we're talking specifically about Canadian peat.
okay,
Mhm.
that's
The
where they have
industry
the.
is bigger. There is still peat bogs in northern North America. However, the industry is bigger in Canada.
They have the infrastructure there.
Yeah, they're ready.
Let's see. What is the scope of biochar in the next 5 years? What is its role, do you
Ooh,
feel?
it's almost a personal question. I think biochar has so much potential. Cost is what's making it difficult to get past. And I think it's similar to almost any technology that we've used in horticulture in the past 50 years. It's all about reducing costs for growers. Biochar is a
Mhm.
good amendment and good material, and as long as we can regulate the pH, we're finding the right product. But when you're competing with products like peat, like core, and like wood fiber that you know a stable cost, it's hard to figure that out. But I mean, we've had plenty of success using a biochar material, so I think there's definitely a good future ahead for biochar as we continue to move through and advance the technology.
Cool, thank you. Let's see. What would be one piece of advice to researchers who are exploring new alternative media and trying to bring that to market?
To researchers or to industry
Yep.
professionals?
This says researchers, so I assume they are at a university or doing something on alternative medias.
Hmm, good question. I mean, I think my entire master's and PhD was researching alternative growing media. So that's a very personal question. And there's a lot of good researchers in the US that are doing the exact same thing. The best part about our industry is that it's really just playing around and seeing how things work out. I mean, we have no shortage of ideas of what can a plant grow in. And so take that idea and move through with it. I mean, there's obviously tons of research that are backing wood fiber, that are backing pine bark, that are backing coconut, moving toward biochar as well. And so start with that. Start with what has been done, start with what has been known, play in that area a little bit, and then branch out from there. I mean, stratification of substrates didn't come from someone saying that this has been successful for 100 years. Let's keep doing that. They took that idea and ran with it. Same with wood fiber. And so I think that's my best advice to them. My entire PhD was just doing that as well. You start with
Mhm.
one project, and then it always will cascade into 17 more. You just never have enough time.
There's so much to do. Let's see. Which substrate has more issues with shrinkage? Peat, moss, pit moss, or wood substrate?
So peat moss, pit moss, or wood substrate, those are the three.
Yep.
I think if I had to choose one that had the most shrinkage, I would say probably the pit moss. Just because of the way that that product is structured. I mean, you have a very, very porous, a lot of airspace in that product, and so once those pores are full of water, it's going to shrink. Wood
Mhm.
fiber is a little bit more difficult to answer because those three manufacturing techniques of wood fiber all create a different type of shrink and swell. The disc
Right.
refined product is going to shrink the most. The hammer mill product is going to shrink the least. And then you have the screw extruded somewhere happily in the middle. So it really just depends.
Everything's different.
Yeah, that's the benefit.
Yeah. To go back to projected increases in peat and other media use, do
Mhm.
you think that 2020, being an atypical busy year, caused an inflation in numbers?
The benefit of that research was that it was done in 2017. So that was before we talked about this extreme explosion in horticulture. While yes, that spike did happen, and a lot of people, companies that we work with and that we've seen are still holding on to long reserves currently. But that doesn't change the fact that our population is going to continue to grow and more plants are going into containers. And so that projection is really based on that idea and less on the ups and downs of the market.
Mhm. Okay. Let's see. Can you brief the importance of food safety on growing media?
Oh, that's a hot topic, especially in the CEA indoor ag world. I mean, there was an entire sector at Indoor AgCon on just food safety. It is huge. I don't think there's anyone that can say differently that the more plants are being grown in containers, the more food safety plays a role. I'm sure you've seen at some point on any article some sort of an outbreak in someone's crop, whether it's lettuce, it's strawberries, or whatever.
Mhm.
And so every company is going to have a food safety plan to make sure that what their products is, no matter where the input comes from, you have to be prepared for what those questions are asked. I mean, I don't think anyone in horticulture expected to get food safety questions like we've seen so far. But for my company, Jiffy, and for a lot of other companies who do control their inputs, I think that's the inputs that you have and the certifications that you carry are going to be the biggest, I guess, ways to differentiate yourself from others. And it's only going to get bigger. I mean, the CEA Alliance is doing a lot right now as well to kind of keep that awareness alive.
Thank you. That was good and brief, but concise. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see. I have no more questions coming in. One,
Well,
I'm going to ask you one canned question, and then if nothing else comes in, then we'll wrap up.
great.
Um, let's see. Does coconut coir have any limitations of its own?
Sure. So I think the biggest comparison that we see in the industry today is the difference between coconut and peat. And I think peat has gotten the biggest, I guess, rap sheet right now for what it's doing to the atmosphere and and carbon sink, blah blah blah. You can read any other article and hear about that. Coconut coir, however, coming from a very regionally specific area, high transport costs, high salinity, a lot of washing, and the manufacturing and then logistics. I mean, I think these are all ways that you could technically say coconut has detractors compared to peat. However, if all of those pieces are put together in the right fashion, then you have a product that actually is very successful, like you see currently on the market.
Thank you. Then we have one last question. Can you use bamboo fibers?
Yeah, I mean, you can. I mean, bamboo fiber is one of the issues with bamboo is that it's just so wet. It's such a waterlogged fiber. I mean, there's biochar products that are using bamboo fiber. And any feedstock that grows in the speed that bamboo does, almost like the same with like miscanthus grass or bagasse. We're talking about ways to try to, I guess, have a high turnover rate. Wood fiber is fantastic because yeah, it is renewable. That tree can grow in 20, 40, 50 years.
Right.
What's the next step is getting something to grow faster. And so that's what we're looking at miscanthus and bagasse and something else. So it's always going to be what's faster, what's renewable, what's local. That narrative will never change.
No, it never will. Well, great. I think that was all of our questions. So thank you. We'll go
Wonderful.
ahead.
Thank you so much.
All right. So thank you for joining us today for another session of AFE's Grow Pro webinar series. If you're interested in learning about AFE's sustainability efforts, we encourage you to sign up to be notified for the launch of Sustainabloom. Sustainabloom aims to help floral industry businesses enhance their sustainable practices by providing how-to guides, checklists, and resources. Visit sustainabloom.org to learn more. Join us next month for Dr. Ping Yu's presentation on biochar for container production on Tuesday, April 23rd at 1 p.m. EST. You can register at endowment.org/GrowPro. While there, check out our past webinars, recordings, and other grower-related resources and research reports available to you for free. Thanks to industry support. We ask that you please complete the brief survey about today's session where you can suggest additional topics and help us continue to improve these webinars. Thank you again for joining us. Have a great day.